This is the Balancing Act by Security Compass, your guide to going fast while staying safe in today's digital world. On part 9 of Leaders in Product Security, Rohit Sethi, CEO at Security Compass, is joined by David Lenoe. David Lenoe is Director, Secure Software Engineering at Adobe. In his role, Lenoe manages the Adobe Secure Software Engineering team responsible for helping to ensure Adobe's products are designed, engineered, and validated using security best practices. Lenoe represents Adobe on SafeCode's board of directors and acts as SafeCode's treasurer. Lenoe joined Adobe as part of the Macromedia acquisition in 2004. At Macromedia, Lenoe held several management and engineering positions in the areas of product security, product management, and quality assurance. Lenoe earned a BA in Japanese language and literature from Connecticut College.
Thanks for joining. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So tell me, how did you get into product security?
Yeah, so it's kind of a long and winding road, but I started off, I was working at Macromedia at the time, which was acquired by Adobe back in 2005. So this predated that. I was working there, Macromedia, known for Flash, Dreamweaver, other products. And I was working as a program manager at the time. My manager had just hired our first security team member. The founding member was Adrian Ludwig, and he is currently the CISO at Atlassian. Adrian was great to work with. He was a one-man show at that time. We had just received, I think this shows you how far back this was, we had just received our first vulnerability report from an outside researcher for Flash Player. He needed some help. Adrian needed some help. So they enlisted me to help out with receiving and responding to vulnerability reports. So I was the first PCERT employee. So that's how I started out. And that was like a quarter time or half time at the time, but Adrian started hiring more people and I became full-time, and that's how I got my foothold into the security field.
Nice. Yeah, Macromedia, I remember that name from many years ago. So you've had both incident response, you mentioned PCERT, which is essentially product incident response, and building security in, essentially report up to you. You've also had your company migrate from desktop to cloud. Tell me about how product security at Adobe has evolved over the years with this change in scope.
Sure, yeah. So when Macromedia was acquired by Adobe, we became the Adobe product security team. So Adrian was the manager there at the time. And we took over. Macromedia had a lot less products, and we took over for the Adobe products. Team grew more and more. At the time, as you say, we were a very desktop focused company. So we were reviewing all the desktop products at the time. We hired in people who were CC+ security experts, and as the threat landscape evolved, Adobe Reader, and then Flash Player became targets in the outside world. So we had to put a lot of attention. That was an incident response effort first and foremost, and it turned into a proactive response. So that was a really interesting experience. What came out of that was we recognized that putting out an update and throwing it over the fence to our customers, that was not enough. So we needed to figure out how to not only fix the vulnerabilities, but how to work into the customer experience being secure by default. So that meant initially doing auto updates, which we take for granted now, but at the time, doing background update. Chrome might have been the first mainstream software that was really pushing this idea, and I give Google a lot of credit there. That was something new and a little bit risky, but in order to try to get our customers updated as quickly as possible, we pushed that out by default. And then doing things like sandboxing. That was a really effective mitigation that we ended up putting into Reader and Flash Player and other products along the way. And of course, we were working with partners like Google and Microsoft on our sandboxing efforts. So the idea of being secure by default and doing our best to protect our customers came out of that. So then when we moved into the cloud, we had to remake the company in a lot of ways. The focus of the company really changed, and thus the focus of the security team changed as well. So we had folks who were desktop interested in and experts in desktop. They had to learn new stuff. That's both the development teams and the security team. So that was a great experience. Lots of new challenges there. As I think about it now, we're applying the same lessons that we learned in desktop towards the cloud, making things secure by default, although we're doing it now not just for our customers, but for our internal customers, the product teams, like pushing them to use secure cloud configurations and to use internal platforms securely via automation. So yeah, that's the evolution of the security program that of course had to follow the evolution of the company.
So fascinating. Some of those things, like you said, have become so mainstream, secure by default, just something that people take for granted and auto updates, but how that wasn't the case at all not that long ago. So it's cool. You guys, along with some of these other companies, have done some pioneering work. In that, you've done a lot, right? And you've rolled out a product security program. Talk to us about what are the biggest challenges you had in rolling out a product security program?
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges which will be familiar to your listeners who have had to do the same. Scaling is a big issue. One of the interesting things that we maybe didn't foresee, but which turned out to be something that was really helpful, is breaking down some of the silos internally. So Adobe had different security pockets all across the company. There's an IT security team. There's an application security team. There's different security teams that were brought in via acquisitions. And over time, those teams have become consolidated under one organization. And again, this is something we take for granted now, but there was a while where Adobe did not have a chief security officer and did not have a consolidated security organization. So that really helped a great deal in just getting alignment, eliminating some of the inefficiencies, and breaking down those organizational barriers. So it's not that people didn't have good intentions, of course they did. But if you're all reporting into one organization, you can take advantage of work that other people are doing, and you can eliminate some of those inefficiencies that I mentioned.
So that is super interesting too, Dave. I think the idea of centralization and the pockets of expertise that pop up in companies, especially large companies, is certainly something we hear companies struggle with. And centralization is always, I think it's aspirational for a lot of companies, easier said than done. But even when you do that, like I think there's this more inherent challenge about getting product and engineering teams to rally around and do this work that maybe isn't always clearly linked to delivering customer value in a visible way. Talk to me about how you got product and engineering teams to care about it and to take it seriously.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. Some of the initial barriers that we faced early on, back when we weren't, for instance, receiving security vulnerability reports, a lot of that has gone away. There are smart people working at Adobe on the product teams, and they recognize like, oh, okay, we are a target of hackers. We need to respond. So that's built in, and for better or for worse, that has helped. But the other thing that we've tried to do is to build up a security culture, like prod and poke that process along with some security training programs, security culture programs. So early on, I think this was 2009 era, we started our training program, security training program. And at the time we borrowed a concept from an internal training program where we used the martial arts belt style system to incent people. You can get your white belt if you complete this set of trainings, your green belt. And then for later on, we added brown belts and black belts. And for brown and black belts, you had to do like practical projects that made a difference from a security perspective. I don't want to take credit for something which we don't deserve, but I'm fairly certain we're the first ones to do that sort of martial arts belt style system for security training, or at least we were among the first to do it, which was a good way to build that grassroots security culture. And the other thing that it helped us to do is it allowed the people who are interested in security and gravitated to it, it allowed us to identify those people and say like, okay, you work on Tmax and you are a brown belt, you're doing these great projects. Why don't you be our security champion? So we came up with that concept of having the embedded person on the team, having them be the voice of security. We might, as a central security team, we might get accused of being sort of ivory tower and a little detached from reality. So if we have people on the ground within the team, they're going to have more credibility just from a like day-to-day, like this is important perspective, like adding their voice helped us a great deal. We might be subject matter experts on the security side, but we don't live and breathe the development process day to day. So having those security champions really helped.
Another example of something that became pretty much a mainstream, I would say at least aspirational industry practice that we're seeing lots of companies evolve to, although just getting that champions program off the ground can be challenging if you haven't done the initial motivation work. But it's definitely been something that people have looked to Adobe to as a really good example of how you can improve embedding security into the development teams.
Yeah, it's really helpful. And the other thing that it does, internal mobility is a big focus for Adobe. So one of the things that having a security champion, one of the benefits that we talk about is you can add this to your CV. You can say, I'm a brown belt, I'm a security champion. And that's helpful from a career development standpoint. I mentioned internal mobility. We have people who end up moving from the product team. So there are people who really enjoy security but want to stay an engineer or a quality engineer or whatever their role might be, product manager even. But there's also people who aspire to move into a central security team. And so we want to make sure that we're keeping people happy internally. And with this internal mobility effort, we'll take somebody from a product team who's showed the interest in the skills and we'll have them come onto the central product security team. We do the reverse as well. People from the central security team end up going to development teams or even becoming product managers or marketing managers. So that's been super cool and helpful all around from a career development process. And then one other thing I'll mention just which we've noticed recently, the value that taking people with untraditional backgrounds has. So somebody who might not necessarily have been somebody who has a security emphasis, development degree, some kind of a security master's or something like that. So we've got people who work on our team who are theater majors or video production majors, people who have a background where maybe they didn't go to college. Myself, I'm a Japanese language and literature major. It's good to cast the net more widely right now, especially when we've got this talent gap in the security industry.
Yeah, I think the combination of those two things, looking for people outside of the core backgrounds and this idea of almost using the development teams as a cross-pollinating, recruiting people from development teams into security and vice versa, sounds like a really good approach. Obviously, in a lot of companies, you got to get past organizational boundaries and political divides. But when you can do it, it seems like a really good answer to the question about how do you attract the right talent to security.
Yeah. One thing we're doing at Adobe right now is any openings that we have, they're only opened internally for 14 days. So it's great to give internal folks a first crack at anything that might pop up.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that idea. Is there anything else, Dave, that you'd like to share with the listeners based on your experience?
Yeah, I'll put in a plug here. I mentioned the security training program that we have. We ended up putting a lot of those trainings into the community via an organization that we're part of called SafeCode. So there were a bunch of other companies contributing, but SafeCode is safecode.org. If you go there, you can check out the trainings that are available. If you're on the market for trainings, that's a good place to start. We originally built those programs. We now are buying from a company you may be familiar with, Rohit. Now we're buying our security trainings, but for a starter kit, SafeCode's a great place to start. And SafeCode has a lot of great resources just for application security development. As we're in this new world where every company is a software company, there's a bunch of lessons learned that you can take advantage of. And Adobe, along with other companies like Microsoft and Google and Dell, EMC, we've applied our lessons learned and put together a bunch of guidance there in SafeCode.
That's great. I mean, I think even this podcast is a lot of good lessons learned from your personal experience, but definitely looking to SafeCode, which, by the way, Steve Lipner was on the series as well, so people will hear directly from him.
That's right.
But yeah, definitely a good place to go to learn from all your experience combined. Very cool. Well, Dave, I really appreciate it. I know you're busy. I really appreciate the time today, and thank you for joining.
Thank you, Rohit. I appreciate it. Hopefully we get to do this in person sometime.
Yeah, hopefully soon.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.